This is day 642 of the Arukh HaShulchan. This week's Arukh HaShulchan is sponsored for a schus for a Zibuk Hagun Bimheira for Jonas and Ezra ben Chana Feigl. If you'd like to sponsor an upcoming shir or more of the Arukh HaShulchan, please contact me directly. Be very greatly appreciated. Today we are doing, since we're supposed to start from Shinai Gimel Dalet, but we did Shinai Gimel Dalet last night to finish off this simon. So we're starting from Shinai Dalet Aleph today. I was supposed to say Shinai Dalet Aleph to Zayin. So Aleph. Well, this time I passed along Shiftzah Kaisel. The opening between the 2 yards, or the window between the yards, came stopped up, or the wall between the 2 yards broke open. Chinese Bible come upon me in the Shabbos Holil B'Uchucho. We said several times the Shabbos once it was started Behetzer remains Mutter. Klamar, meaning Dimi Knisa the Shabbos here Behetzer. If when Shabbos began it was okay to carry. I'll be Shachagan Diskalka Hetzer even afterwards the Hetzer was ruined. Arena would say Holil B'Uchucho since it was permitted remained permitted. And when Dover it's understood Shainza B'Shina Mechitzas Gemuros. This is not true if absolute walls fell down. Going to Nafla Mechitza. So Shus Yoch Rhyme, the wall between Shus Yoch and Shus Rhyme fell down. Hey, God, but say no matter Hol Vucha. Do you think we say Hol Vucha? And that Pshita Shain Sforla market. We can't say that. Elamina said Malcolm Shalona says Shini got about Mechitzas. We say this in place where there's not a great change in the walls. O Shain no game Mechitzas cloud. Or where the change is nothing to do with the walls altogether. Come on, she's part of B'Siyat Shaya. That shall be explained. Came before Gemara. This is also explained in the Gemara. The bracket says here that is so should be so daf yud zayin rav so perik but so daf zayin rav being a zeh we brought shehucha shom ad kan lo kamar yosi as leising the mechitzos when there's no walls. That's when it's no good. Base village time sheyu benem pesach halon. So 2 people who had between them an opening or window, if every been named the main air together. This time Shabbos at Pesach Halon and Shabbos, somehow the doorway became stopped up or the window. They're no longer open to each other. Never can carry from this one to that one. There are chorim stukim shebenem through cracks in the wall or holes which exist between the 2 of them. The whole since it was mutming of Shabbos, it made mutter. They also carry between 2 yards. They can carry over the top of the wall. There was a wall between 2 yards. But each one fell, and each one made its own area. The difference of Shabbos and the wall fell down on Shabbos. They all each carrying their own chutzner. I feel came Shabbos or bais, even kalim which come out of the house, which normally you can't do in a chutzner shenim rebbes. Hutra, since it became mutter, I have Shabbos, but Shmashas came mutter. If I have got the Zeshim Mechitza, you might obviously there's a change in the wall. And the Mechitza of Sekes Ben Shus Niflados, since it's an inner wall, which doesn't distinguish between 2 separate forms of Rishus, Kamo Ben Rishus Yog Shazraim Ben Rishus Yog Karmas, such as a wall which distinguishes between Rishus Yog and Shazraim or between Rishus Yog Karmas, a Ben Rishus Yog Rishus Yog Berai between one Rishus Yog and another Rishus Yog, Havik and Kanshinim Mechitza, as if there are no change in the walls. But if in fact there was an opening in the outer wall between the Chatzar and Rishus Harabim, or the Carmelis, also it's forbidden. By those walls we don't say since it was mutter, it remains mutter. If the Chatzar developed an opening into the Carmelis on Shabbos, now Sagam Carmelis, it all too becomes a Carmelis. Now but there is one kula. The mutter the Talto Shnei Amos, the Chatzar Shnei Amos Carmelis. You can carry out into the Carmelis. You can carry 2 amos in your yard and 2 amos in the Carmelis. So like Kiddush. Therefore, Yeshua Gamzed, the Gamzed also. Those who say it's also because it's Hotzah. Because in this case, you would be saying, well, if you lost the Shem Carmelis, you're saying lost the Shem Chatzar. So therefore, you can carry it into the Carmelis with 1 swoop of Dalad Amos. So they say, no. The Chumash still retains the name Chatzar. Those people answer. Rabbeinu says Steve got across the mutter ayin sham. It says it was matir. The Bialocha brings the name Akrayim that is Machlekes Rishonim, and therefore he says you should not be Mako. So Arukh HaShulchan tends to be lenient. The Mishnah Berurah does not. Gimel v'day you should know the Bahach the Erev Derech HaPesach. In this case, in a case where you made an Erev through an opening. When the time HaPesach and the opening came closed up, which is bar which you just spoke about. The Mutarim L'Talta can be called them. You can still carry Mechotzer Chotzer from yard to yard. Derech Chorim was stalking through holes and cracks on over the wall. Because what I mean is if after the Rambam Ein Mutal B'Chol Chotzer L'Atzmo. According to the Rambam, you're not allowed to carry only in each Chotzer by itself. Avalo Mechotzer Chotzer, but not from yard to yard. V'Arabusa. So what's the chiddush? Abish Chotzer Chadu below Eruv. Even the 1 yard is now in Eruv. Why? Because the Erev is now in the second Chotzer, which is not accessible. Come between the house and nevertheless in its own yard, it's allowed to carry. The houses on the 1 yard can carry in that yard, even though the Erev is now in the other Chotzer, which is not accessible. Two Chatzers which made an Erev in unison, Derech HaPesach through an opening. Stam HaPesach, the opening came closed. It just made the carry in its own area, which will be mitzvah Shabbos, which will call it. It's a mitzvah for part of Shabbos and mitzvah for all of Shabbos. Akal Shana. But still arrive. The Ravid argues. That's one main tzorich lomar. If they're carrying for themselves, that's no chiddush. They can even carry from one to each other. Like before they got stopped up. And he was like the Ein Comments Rambam came. Arukh HaShulchan says that's not the pshat in the Rambam. You can't love it. Achas v'achas muteres la'atzma. The Shulchan said each one's mutter for itself. Sounds like the Rambam takes the chiddush in both chatzeros. Even though it's only chiddush for one chatzer, the one which doesn't have an eruv in its own domain, but rather the inaccessible domain. For that one, it's a chiddush, not a chiddush for the other one. So why is one saying that as if there's a chiddush in both? The Kavan Rambam Kenu. So Rambam is saying this: the feet of Torah of Inyan based on the subject matter here. Sheinichu erev v'talta mizulazu. They put down erev to carry from one chutzner to the other chutzner. V'aton nistam HaPesach. Now the opening got closed up. Ve'mokom v'talta mizulazu. There's no place to carry from one to the other. V'kom kom nevertheless erev kaim. The erev is in effect. Each one can carry on its own. When it says it means that it can use the second chotzer. And if the finally comes some crack in the wall where they can get from one chotzer to the other chotzer, Vade the mutter it's permitted. The Ram only divides between the two of them because they're physically divided and you can't carry in practice. He doesn't have in mind to answer from one chotzer to another chotzer. It's a bit of a different. It's a bit of a stretch. Seems to be a bit of a stretch, but okay. The Mishnah Berurah says like the Beis Yosef, that each one can carry on its own, not that they can carry from one to the other. Dav, you made an air for a year. But and then there became the opening came closed on a weekday. But the air was negated. Came with shloya, but still when it's the Shabbos because it wasn't open when Shabbos began. But it became open again during the week. It was closed for Sunday, Monday, and then became open on Tuesday. Have eruv. It's come here. Blooming came this time, but we don't say that since it was closed, it became the air was negated. Not only that, elafilu nistam b'chov closed up on a weekday, but niftach b'Shabbos. Then became open on Shabbos. That's a mayor of low bottom. The fact that the door is closed off doesn't it doesn't count for the eruv. Even you deliberately close it off so it shouldn't be a door. Become eruv kaim, the Arab is still extant. When that opening is reopened, it goes back to its extra, which is very big chiddush. Those who say the parat b'tzimei Pesach, if you broke down the side posts and the lintel of the doorway, which is customarily standard to become butter for a mezuzah, This battle, the garment there is completely canceled. Circa Erev Achel, she Bachel need another Erev when it's opened up. Arukh HaShulchan goes so far and say Ve'enu Ikar. That's not true. The Khan Eino Toli Begili Daita Stimas HaPesach has nothing to do with what he has in mind when he closed the doorway, but what he had in mind when he made the Eruv. At that point, he had no intention of ever closing it. That he closed later on is like an Arya Derviola. It's like a lion standing there in front of the door, but move the lion goes back to the original situation. Hey, V'yesh Misharot Salom, but those want to say the Sasma Kavana. If you close it deliberately, it only works if you open on the weekday. The other reason we say the Shabbos Chazazeh, we say when Shabbos began, then begins, then it went back to its heter. It became actually. When Shabbos began, he had in mind that it should go back to the original Erev status. When Shabbos came open on Shabbos, and he negated it from the status of Pesach before Shabbos. I mean, Lord, something this is a Shabbos. Obviously, he didn't want to be in the Shabbos that the bread should create an Eruv. The Bishlam is something I understand when it got closed on its own. Yes, I can say the Chashval Eruv that he had in mind that the Eruv should take effect. Sheti Patach even when the door becomes open. Yeah, Eruv. It should be there. Loisiach Daito because the Shabbos. He wasn't like Matzeh Biyadayim beginning of Shabbos. But when he actually calls himself, it's like the Chia Biyadayim. I'm there a bit of Achar V'niftach b'Shabbos. I feel so amazing. He writes that it was on Shabbos, and even he closes it liberally. Mashma Hedi, it sounds explicit. I feel Chai Gav the Mutter. Even in this scenario, it's permitted. Why? Yesh Farish Batam, we can explain in his reasoning. The Zesh, the Sansa, and Pesach, that way you close the door off. Loki Vein Lebitl Erev. Didn't mind the gate to Erev. And Shlos have Pesach Zech, like the post closed the house was Pesach Acher. He didn't want people going through till he was ready for them to go through again. He's ready to go through again. The Erev goes back to its original status. Avshir Shabbos Lobita Me'olam, and the unity achieved by the bread is never canceled. The Shabura says you should be machmir if it was closed by Maze and open on Shabbos, it's usher. But if it's open on a weekday, it's definitely mutter. Vav, you have a small yard, and one entire side became open for Shabbos to a larger yard. And the gap is now not more than 10 amos. The large yard is allowed to take houses out of its vessels out of its houses into the Chatzar and move. That's when they made a Chatzar Erev itself, because it has the pasim on each side. Tanasura, Tanas forbidden. Take out vessels from its houses to its Chatzar. And it can't even be unless they made Erev together. That's only where the walls of the small one enter into the chutzner, into the big chutzner, because then they cut off. Because we have palach near b'fnim misham mechutz is considered to be a lechi or lechi koshu. So therefore, only if the walls of the small one enter into the big one and cut off the side posts, then it's not, you can't carry the small one. Everybody sees that the remaining walls of the big one are not relevant to the small one. Because otherwise the small one would also be permitted, because the principle we just mentioned, that even though we can't see it on the inside, you can see it on the outside. Somebody who stands outside, behind the small yard, Yisrael, in front of, he'll see the side walls, which also work for the small one. It's also when the walls are set back as a result of the walls of the Ketana going into the Gedola. The walls of the side walls are set back 3 tefachim from the edge of the walls of the Ketana. The Tefachim Mishloshem, it's less than 3 kilovod. It's considered to be lovud, and you're talking about near Bachutz. They're close enough. The Simon Shin Samachil, Ein Sham, Simon Shin Samachay. Zayin. B'chein Gag Kotan Shif, and it's called the same principle of the wet roof. Gag Kotan Shif, it's called Shabbos, Milua, Legag, Koto, small roof opened up completely to a big roof. Hakatan also of kalim which shovs the bites can't take to the small roof kalim which were in the house. Ellen can't give yachlas made the air together. If I go the mutter and the large roof is mutter, she have asim made the air to itself. Because the Torah should not see dal the zel davka shu mechitzas abai shagdol nikors mishomin agag. So if the walls of the house can be seen by the person who's on the roof. Which means that there's no extensions over the walls. The walls come up, and then the roof comes in. There's no extensions like we have today in our houses, where the roof goes over the sides of the wall. The time where you can say as if the walls continue straight up. I believe any course we can't. They're not nicker. Such as where the roof extends out over the walls. Have a carmelus. It's considered to be a carmelus. The roof is going to be a carmelus because it doesn't have proper walls. Unless there's a window open to it from the house, which is 4x4, which comes but it's awful to the house. So ask or should I understand? Got carmelus. Why is the roof of carmelus? It's total shusayachid. So 10 more than 10 fachim off the ground, 4x4. Ella the Marisha Blita Dalit Fachim. So it's about where the extension, the protrusion over the side of the side of the house was 4x4 Fachim at least. Shushir Karmelis, that becomes its own Karmelis. So elevated Karmelis, but it's a Karmelis. Can call God Pnifat Smilo Karmelis. Then or the whole roof is open to the Karmelis. Vavigamu Karmelis, and it too is a Karmelis. V'im Bolek Tzas, normally good sake. If it's but even if it extends a little bit, we still don't say good asik. Ain't a bullet, but if it doesn't extend at all, Havishus Yogomer, it's a total Shus Yogomer, Omishus Rabim, like any block in Rishus Rabim, which is Gavoa Asora, which is 10 foot high, V'Rochav Arbam 4x4. Mikom nevertheless Kishnei Gang Butim Zelazeh, when both the roofs are broken open to each other, Osa Zelazeh, each one for fits. The other Kshenim Gifufim when we don't have those side walls, which we discussed before. Braxton says, "Mashorish gag pergogagos liga maskim bechisos." Because lamivnei etzma blita the carmelus. It's not because of the protrusion that's the carmelus. Kamish bolik tzas, but rather since it extends over the side even a little bit. Enkam gurasig mechitza, enkum masig, which there is true. There is no gurasig. We may have the carmelus, but then automatically comes the carmelus. But tzarchi, and how does that make it exactly carmelus? The fact that it just extends a little bit. Make it also to carry because no mechitzas nikoras. That makes it carmeless. So the Mishnah Berurah writes that also the same thing. He writes that if it's he writes the big kula. He says that if it's only if it's bolei for tfachim, then it's also the carrying time. But it's not bolei for tfachim. It's mechitzas nikoras, which the Arukh HaShulchan does not seem to hold of. He brings that. Yeah. That there's now a different spar, which is perhaps more the gra, that even if it's that since the gag is 10 fachim high, there's no way you can come a karmelis because there's no elevated karmelis unless evidently there's that more extended protrusion, which is karmelis in of itself. It's a bit difficult. So in any event, the generally is accepted you don't see gurasik through a roof, and therefore we would not be allowed to carry on that gag. Notwithstanding what it seems to be in Mishnah Berurah here. That was actually the whole segment.